The better to see you with. Hi, yes, I'm Alison Arngrim, and this is the Alison Arngrim Show. Some of you may remember me as Nellie Olson, evil Nellie Olson from Little House on the Prairie. But tonight, I'm Alison Arngrim, and this is the Alison Arngrim Show. And here in the Alison Arngrim Show, we talk about things that make us feel good, the TV shows and the movies that made us feel good, and the people who made them, and people who are doing things now to make the world a better and more interesting place. And oh, do I have a good one tonight? Okay, I just met him, but I feel like we knew each other as childhood friends, and I keep saying, did we cross paths? Because this is bananas. Okay, so he's written this marvelous book, Mom, Dad, and Me in Classic TV. It sounds like my life. His father was a very famous producer, Harry Ackerman, and his mom was Eleanor Donahue. Yes, Eleanor Donahue from Father Knows Best and all of those shows. So he grew up in the same kind of wacky Hollywood milieu that I did. And I'm reading his book and going, and I was at that. Yes, and I know that person. I knew that person. Okay, this is getting like spooky. When I like at one point just stopped and said, I have to do word search my own name and Little House on the Prairie to make sure I'm not in here at some point because this is crazy. Absolutely fabulous, marvelous stories, fascinating person through show business, got into show business, and then became an Episcopalian priest. Wait, what? Yes! Ladies and gentlemen, the fabulous Peter K. Ackerman.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for having me here.
This is great. This is great. Yeah, I'm reading your book and I'm just going, and that was my week. Wait, what? Batman? Wait, as a child, I was just talking about this morning. It's so strange. I was with you talk about being on the set of Batman. My agent was Lou Sherrill, who was Adam West's agent when I was a child. I was with Batman's age, so it was all like crossing over. Hollywood is a tiny, tiny town. People joke about this. Oh, it's a really small town. There's like 50 people. They just move around a lot. It's true. It's crazy. When I read someone's autobiography, grew up in Hollywood at the same time I did, I'm like, So I was probably 10 feet away for like all of it's bonkers. And yours is absolutely this name drop circle because it's the same kind of people. You were born into absence. They say born into Hollywood royalty, and you were. Um, your father was executive producer on all of our favorite shows from our childhood, certainly mine. And then your mom was on all of our favorite shows. And you were just growing up in this. It was all normal at the time for you.
Right. It was. I was born, my first memory or second memory really was my mother on television. I was sitting on her lap and Father Knows Best was on its weekday rerun, Channel 5 at 4 o'clock. And in walked her character, Betty Anderson, the oldest daughter on Father Knows Best. And she said, look, honey, look, there's mommy. And I looked and saw my mother on the screen in black and white. And okay, that's what it is. And as we had in a prior conversation, it was a few years later, I'm with my friend down the street, Johnny, and I finally asked him because it was bothering me. And I said, Johnny, my mom's on Channel 5 at 4 o'clock. When is your mom on? And that's when I learned that. And he said, Peter, not everybody's mom's on television. I'm like, oh, that's when the penny dropped.
I swear, until I was about 6 or 7, I thought everybody was on TV. That it was like the Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes of Fame. I thought people took it in turns. They took it in turns. And when are you? I love that. When is your mother? Go on. It was like, but my mother was in all the cartoons, and so her voice would just. It was perfectly normal to turn on the cartoons and have her be all of them. And even the one she wasn't starring in the Office of the Gumby cast, but sometimes she'd be a guest. So I'd be watching a completely unrelated cartoon, and suddenly her voice comes out. It's like surprise, she's in that one too. And I thought that was like totally normal. It was very normal to have your mother be a cartoon. It was years before I knew that was not how people people did not live like that. And your family, you enjoyed it enormously. You tell fantastic stories of being a small child and then even old child and going to the sets and meeting all of these people and having them be just regular folks that your folks knew.
Yeah, I just fell in love with the industry at an early age. And one thing my parents did is in the family system, and I was born at the top of their careers. My dad was doing all these shows at Screen Gems, Bewitched, Dennis the Menace, The Flying Nun, and he was also the head of production at Screen Gems as well. He had been the vice president for West Coast programming for CBS and helped to start I Love Lucy, and just his hands were everywhere. But at home, we were just a regular family. We were like a family out of one of his TV shows. So there was none of that, and you get it some places, that Hollywood elitism that you'll get. And we were just regular folks. So going to the magical place, the studio, was just always a hoot. And the first time was really, my dad did it as a favor. My older brother Brian and I loved Batman, and my dad knew the executive producer of Batman, so he made arrangements, took us to the set, and that was a really pivotal moment for me, because I remember standing with my older brother in the stately Wayne Manor interior set and seeing the bust of Shakespeare, and the bookcase was already slid open. I could see the bat poles, and I walked over, looked down, and there were just about a 6 foot drop and two large kind of sofa pillows down there to help stop the actors when they slid down them. And it wasn't the bat cave, and it didn't disappoint me. I got it that this was magic, and okay, and that was it. I was in
Now,
love.
but how old were you then when you saw the bat holes and realized it's not the bat cave?
So I probably went, it must have been in 67, so I would have been five,
Oh, really,
six.
totally the same age. And that's the thing is I knew I'd been with my mother to the studio and seen that cartoons are some people go in a room and talk into big microphones, and somebody somewhere is drawing pictures and they make this thing. And I knew when I had been to sets, it's weird. I knew a lot of stuff wasn't real. I wasn't upset by it, but I knew stuff wasn't real at 5, 6, 7, 8 watching TV. And I had friends who were still just sure that tiny people were inside the television, if not, that it's just this was real. And it's so strange to, as a young child, have that sense of reality versus fantasy and actually know that the TV isn't real that early. That's, I mean, people don't learn that until they're adults.
Right. And some of them still think, everybody they see on TV is just that way in real life and has gone through those experiences. And I have to laugh. And my mother is still alive and retired. And, people will ask her questions, like they'll name a show and they'll say, when your character picked up the spatula instead of the spoon, why was that? And she doesn't know. It was just, that was the prop. And they said, pick something up from the table when you move across the room. And that's what she did. But it wasn't like she put a lot of thought into it.
Oh, and we have to break it to people all the time with Little House on the Prairie that
I'm
that
sure.
that was not real snow. And no, we weren't in the mountains. And no, it doesn't look like Minnesota because we weren't in Minnesota. And it's all thing. No, those were big plastic flakes. And really, it looked like snow. No, that's snow. And just the things were, and it's 50 years later, and you would think. But it's fabulous to learn that as a kid. You have Paul Lynde stories. Now, how did you meet Paul Lynde?
I met Pauline. It was the greatest opportunity for me when I was, I guess we're talking now about 74. So what am I, 12?
Yeah, I
And
think we're exactly the same age. This is
I
crazy.
think
Okay.
we are. I read your book, and I think we're born in the same year. I don't mind naming it, but I don't want to out you. So,
That's fine.
but
That's fine. They all know. They all know.
they
It's
all
okay.
know. Okay. This year, I'm the same age as the year I was born. So I'll just put it
Yes.
down.
Yeah. What month is your birthday? Have you turned it yet?
April. I've turned it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're sorry. January. Yes. I've
Okay.
been it now for, I'm 62 and a half.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. So, Paul Lynde, my dad took my brother and I on different days, and I stayed to go down to the set. We had, I think, because we went to Catholic schools, our holiday break was different than the public schools, which is what the studios went by. So when we had the week off, production was happening. So mom would be like, get these kids out of the house. So Brian went on Monday, didn't want to go again, although he made a friend that day sitting next to a guest actress on the Paul Lynde show, Jodie Foster, who he told
Foster.
me, he joined in coloring. And I went on Tuesday through Fridays, and I even saw the taping of the show. And it was great. At that age, I got to sit in my spot, and I hardly moved from it. I was a shy kid, so I never talked to Jodie Foster, who was sitting up with her mother behind me in the stands, and got to watch production unfold and got to see what happens. And so on my first day, Dad took me backstage of the set, uh, the back of the set, and there was Paul. And he took me over and said, "Paul, I'd like you to meet my son, Peter." And Paul was reading a newspaper, and he looked up at me, and I stuck out my hand like I was taught to do and said, "Hello, I'm Peter Ackerman," and stuck out my hand. And he gave it a very weak fish-like handshake and said, "Hello," and then just whoosh, put his paper back up. And so, then I've heard that Pauline didn't like kids, and I can say that I can tell that's true.
He was sort of open about that. It was, the old "don't work with children or animals,"
Right.
which you got stuck working with all the time. So there you go. So children.
But he was marvelous. I mean, I watched him do the same lines in the same scenes every week, and he was a trooper. I mean, it was great watching him work.
You talked about, like, your mother doing the autograph sessions and all these kind of things as a, young girl, and then now we do all that now with all these, like, Comic Cons and everything, and
Right.
it just it's great. Do people still? I mean, she's retired. Does she still get called where people want her to come and do the autograph shows and the personal appearances and the whole
They do, and
shebang?
she doesn't like doing them. She did it for so many years for free. She fans would find out her address. There's websites. I don't know how they did it
So
before,
easy now.
but yeah. But fans would just send the requests in the mail, sometimes without self-addressed envelopes to send back or anything. And my mom would pay the freight. She would pay for the picture.
Oh,
She would sign it. She'd put it in an envelope, pay the postage, and send it off. And she did that weekly. Lots and lots and lots of fans. And she tried the autograph show thing, and it just wasn't for her. And then she told me recently that um, though we are not wealthy because the shows my parents made were not made in the times where you made the big bucks. Um, uh, she's and my stepfather are well off enough for the rest of their lives. She's 87, and she felt bad because without naming them, there's contemporaries of hers who go to those shows who actually need the money,
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
feels that she's taking from them if she's
Oh,
for the people that are deciding, should I get an Eleanor Donahue or a blank? And she just figured not going to do that.
that's very sweet. I mean, it's funny. I've been talking about it just the other day because we're off to another one, this weekend with the Little House Gang. It is not for everyone. There has to be a certain mindset of people who can sit there and do that all day. I don't mind it. Other people just would love it, but many people are like, nope, that is not a thing I do. And realizing some actors are just like, no, that's not a thing I do. I know I'm not going to sit there and write my name all day. I can't. I can't do this. This is not. And I love that she's like worried about the other people because it's true. There's people that are just giving the money to charity. There are people that are absolutely hoping they will make the rent if they get in there
Right.
and sign enough. And I find I try to be helpful because I draw, so I'm always like, sit next to me. There'll be a lot of people over here. Get that. I'll tell them to go to your table. Uh, but yes, I try to get it. Go buy something. But it's such a weird environment, and I wonder how she handled that because obviously she would be in demand. People would want her to do it, but it's like, yeah, people get to retire, and it's interesting when you said not crazy wealthy like the people on the later shows. That's a phenomenon that people don't realize that there was a period in Hollywood where you could be like a working class as person. You were a working Hollywood person and you made a living, but unless you were on one of these shows or this movie, you didn't get rich. That wasn't a thing.
Right. And where my life would have changed, and I think I would have done poorly with wealth, is my dad had an opportunity during Bewitched. The uh, the muckety mucks at Screen Gems went to him and to Bill Asher. Bill Asher was the director, the producer, and married at the time to Elizabeth Montgomery, and said, "How about we pay you less, but we'll give you ownership in the show." Bill said yes. My dad said no. And then we ended up struggling. And Bill I remember when my mom would go out to dinner with Bill and his wife, he had a stack of $20 bills. He's tipping the guy opening the door, the person that seats them at the table, the person that comes and says hello. And he just was lousy with money.
Ah, but that's the thing, is it's that getting that piece of the thing. My mother still, she joked for years and years about it. My mother was alive. She talked about that. She did the first Family album, the one with
Yeah.
Vaughn Meter
Oh,
as
yeah.
JFK. She was Caroline and John John. When all the people were signed to do that, they were asked if they wanted a percentage or a flat fee. Everybody took the flat fee because they didn't think it would go anywhere. They didn't think it would even get distribution. So the producers made out very, 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 very well. And my mother's like, ugh, I should have taken the percentage. What did I know? You'd have gone to private schools. It would have been whole. It's, we don't realize it. And like Little House, we got paid okay. We got the residuals. We were in that in perpetuity 70s zones. We got the residuals. But I always tell people it wasn't Friends money.
Right. Right.
That was a whole other universe. They didn't pay people that much money on a show. It didn't exist. And we just know, and none of us got that level of money. And people didn't. And many people who you saw in dozens of shows,
Right.
they got a house eventually, but like a regular size house that they live in. It's
Yeah, and the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I love that movie. It takes me back to where we grew up in the era and everything. A great example of an actor who's plugging away doing the thing and not necessarily rolling in the dough. But I love it.
that movie. I laughed so hard. I'd heard about it. My friends were all saying, they said, never mind any of the Manson stuff. No, no. If you grew up in Hollywood during
Yes.
that time period, or heaven forbid you were in the industry at that time, go see this movie. All my former child star friends were like, go see this movie. And they were in a
Yeah.
star. And I did. I burst out laughing. And when the little girl on the porch in the Western TV
Yeah.
show is giving him the hard time, I turned to my husband and said, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was in this film. Yeah, it's just, I was hysterical the whole thing, but it was so dead on. And we grew up in this whole time period. People wondering what was it? We grew up in that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood time period. In that whole zone where there wasn't social media yet. So actors, you didn't know them unless maybe you saw them on talk shows or interviews. So to see them in your living room at dinner or go to the set was really weird.
Yeah.
It's not a usual thing.
And for us, I mean, just seeing them around town, and it wasn't, I don't know how it is today because I don't live on the West Coast anymore. Um, gosh, I remember growing up, Studio City, I'd go to Winchell's Donuts and I'd be walking in and walking out as Leif Garrett. It was no big deal. It was just Leif Garrett went in there to get a donut. I'm going in to get a donut. Leif Garrett's here. I remember uh, I used to work at that McDonald's across from CBS Radford. That was my first job.
Wow.
And somewhere, that's why I remember that area so well. I think I was driving by this time, and I remember um, your star on Little House on the Prairie. I'm sorry, I can't pull names when I
Oh,
need to.
Michael.
Melissa Gilbert. Melissa Gilbert
Oh, Gilbert, yeah.
was and I don't know if she was working at CBS Radford or was living in that area, but she was roller
Right.
skating. I used to see her roller skating all the time down Ventura
Totally
Boulevard.
normal thing. That's right. Yeah, because her family lived in Encino, and she was in that area and everything. Yeah, Schwab's drugstore, which is a real thing, not
Mhm.
just made up thing. And Dick Van Dyke would be eating at the counter. Just everyone, you would walk in and you would sit down next to a famous person at the counter, and this was completely normal. You're picking up your dry cleaning, going to Burbank Airport, all of
Yeah,
that, and you see famous people.
yeah.
It was
My
like a
my
freaking
go-to
movie.
place when I was in my 20s, maybe 30s, and people would come to town and they'd say, "We want to see somebody famous. Where should we go?" I'd always tell them to go to Jerry's Deli when Jerry's Deli existed on Ventura Boulevard because that was a place. Just sit and give yourself 5 minutes and look around. You'll see somebody.
Hamburger Hamlet at Sunset and Doheny
Mhm.
was also crawling with people because the 9,000 building and the other offices near it were all the agents and managers were. And they would all meet with their agents and boom, so like But
Yeah.
yeah, you could go get fries with people. It was just totally, um, you have a whole long story in there about the whole bewitched thing. As you said, Bill Asher married to Elizabeth Montgomery, and you refer to her as Auntie Liz at several
Right.
points. That's this close to Elizabeth Montgomery, and then they're splitting up in the show, and it was a huge thing. And people forget families are involved, and people get tangled up with these. And then what happens when things happen?
Yeah, and it was such an interesting time to grow up and place to be. So Liz and Bill were Aunt Liz and Uncle Bill to us Ackerman boys. I'm one of four boys, by the way, and apparently my mom and Liz, I learned later, were in a race to have a girl to see who would have the girl first. And so my mom had me, they had Bill Jr., then we had my brother James, and they had Robert, and then we had my brother Chris, and they had Rebecca. So they got the girl.
They
And
won.
they won. But we were close, and they were always at our house. I think every weekend they were at our house. And so I'd go to the set and I'd see people I knew, and it was great. And my last time on the Bewitched set, I was sitting, Dad left me, he had something to do. And so I was sitting in his director chair and had Liz and Dick Sargent on either side of me. And we were playing the Jumble game that was a puzzle in the LA Times.
The jumble.
And, and, um, it was just such a magical day. I'll skip the story. There was kind of a joke she played during the Jumble game. We can get back to that. It's in the book if people are interested. Um, at one point, they were filming a different part of that scene where she had to faint, and the director made a comment about her derriere. And oh, Liz, honey, I could. And it wasn't her husband directing this episode. Oh, Liz, honey, I could look at that all day or watch you do that all day. Uh,
Yikes.
and it wasn't uncomfortable based on the crew. It was she laughed, they laughed, but that was Aunt Liz, and she did what my mom did, and I saw my mom act on sets like I'm seeing her act, and it just didn't compute. And I something was up, and I was too young and innocent. I didn't know any divorced people, didn't know about that, and but it didn't surprise me when whatever time it was after that, whether it was a month or 2 months, the show ended, and
Wow.
it and I heard it end. Liz apparently was willing to go on if my dad would agree to push Bill out and bring in her boyfriend, this fellow who was directing that, as the new producer. And my dad said to her on the phone, Liz, I can't do that. Bill's my partner. And she said, well, then Bewitched is over. And I heard my dad get off the phone. I heard him relate that conversation to my mother, and that's how the show ended.
And see, this is mind blowing to people. People don't realize that people's personal lives in Hollywood do interact and do factor in. People go, why did that show end? Was it the ratings? Was it this? Well, no, this person got a divorce, but this person's ex husband was still the partner. You're like, wait, that's a thing. And people's lives change. I mean, even with Little House, like, well, Michael wanted to move on and he had an idea for another show, and everything had changed, and everyone had gotten older, and people had all gotten divorced and remarried, and it was a different world. It's like, well, we're not doing this anymore. It was like our people's lives, do interact with the production decisions, and it's hard for people to believe, but there
Yeah.
you go. And how weird for a kid to go, oh, Aunt Liz, what's going on? What?
And I probably the biggest regret I have, and it may have been a part of why their kids never came over to our house again, is that the last time they were at our house, I think it was the morning I had heard that, and Bill brought the kids over probably to have a conference with my dad, and I was out back, and Bill Jr., who was known as Willie then, and I were playing on the treehouse in our backyard, and I said to him, so did you hear about your parents? And I was innocent. I was not trying to be a jerk. And he goes, yeah, they told us that they still love us, but they're not in love anymore. And I said, well, I heard she's in love with this other person on the show. And it was so innocent. And he just kind of went, oh, okay. Fast forward to Christmas, we're supposed to host Bill and the kids, and Bill shows up. And my mom says, where are the kids? And he looked at her and said, Liz doesn't want them coming over here anymore. And I'm going, oops, I know why. I didn't say it.
That's the what is it? Maybe that little pictures have big ears. It's that's what and children are going to commiserate. I mean, if anything, you're hoping like, hey, that's really too bad about your folks. How you doing? How would you wouldn't know? Oh, you was this is the adults. What did that mean to you to even say? I think she's in love with the other, right? But they must have had 14 fits. He came home and told his mother that. Guess what? Guess what Ackerman
Peter
said? Oh,
Ackerman said, yeah.
uh,
It
yeah,
could have been that. It could have been her disappointment with my dad's decision. But I kept thinking, and Liz was nice to me. I met Liz one more time on
good.
at Paramount, and Dad was working, maybe still in his advisory role with Screen Gems, although he was working for Paramount Studios for a while. And he said, "Oh, I ran into Liz. She's filming a TV movie, Lizzie Borden." And I told her I was bringing you by tomorrow. She said to bring you by the set. And so I did, and it was a wonderful time to see her, and um,
Well,
a nice,
it's a great
memorable
smack in
time.
the middle of the divorce, and it wasn't quite as
Yeah, but
hot a
she
situation.
she didn't let on that I had said anything. She treated me nice. She heard I was taking tap lessons, and she said, "Show me your stuff." And I gave her the shuffle ball change a couple times, and yeah, it ended nicely. But I should go see a therapist for this. Not that they're broadcast a lot, but I have never, ever, ever, ever seen any of Liz's post Bewitched work, of which they're all fabulous. She gets
The Liz board thing was great.
good reviews, and I just there's something about
Interesting.
that encapsulation of time and the Aunt Liz I knew. Um, I'm sure one day I'll be going around cable and I'll be looking for something to watch, and something she did will pop up, and I'll watch it.
But you're
But
right. That's really interesting that you somehow managed to not watch anything after that. That's
it just I want to remember Aunt Liz as I remember her. Yeah.
and she may have totally realized, okay, it's the kids, but thought, well, let's nip this in the bud. Maybe we don't need the children having any more interesting
Yes,
conversations. Like he
exactly.
didn't
Exactly.
mean it, but God knows what else is going to come out of that child's mouth. Don't, yeah.
She could have asked. She trusted me because um, we were leaving a Rams game once and going to the limousine that we all took. And I don't know why I said limousine with air quotes, but it was a limousine.
Seems so weird. Yes.
And on the way, I said, again, innocent kid, I said, "Hey, Aunt Liz, can you wiggle your nose for me?"
Oh,
And she gave me kind of a stern, "Ask me when we get into the limo." And so we got in the limo, and I said, "Can you wiggle your nose?" And she said, "Peter, I will wiggle my nose for you." She goes, "I will do it once as long as you promise you'll never ask me to do it again." And I said, "Okay, I promise." And she did it, and that was it. So she could have trusted me.
but that was cool because she's like, I'm not wiggling my nose here in front of 8,000 people
Right.
because it's, yeah, when we're alone, we will wiggle the nose. It's understandable. But that's the thing to be a kid in these situations with all of this stuff going on, but with a child's innocence going, wait, what is happening? Why is all this going on? It's so strange. It's such a strange phenomenon. And obviously, I was there, I know. And so that's why I found your book fascinating. And of course, you talk about all the stuff your parents did back in the beginnings of television, which going back to radio, and that the infamous the three camera method that all of us know, the three camera method of every sitcom ever on the face of the earth, and everyone talks about who started it, how did it start. Your father was there; he was part of the
Part of it.
beginnings of the three camera method.
And my dad's version of it makes the most sense because now I remember when Desi Arnaz called our home to say, "Harry, I'm writing my autobiography and I'm putting in that I came up with it."
Oh, no.
So he came clean to my dad and just said, "I'm doing this. It'll help me sell books, whatever." Um, but everybody has said it was solo my idea. And my dad said, "No, it was collaborative." I said, uh, the Al Simon, who was, I think, what was Al? Was he was, I must have been the camera director of photography, I think, Al Simon. And he had used multiple cameras on, I think, Truth or Consequences at CBS. It wasn't three cameras, but I think it was two cameras. So he was used to multiple cameras. And
Okay.
so when the discussion about Lucy needs an audience. Well, how do we do an audience and film it so it's fresh? And she can go off the laughter and we don't have to try to repeat the laughter. Well, we've done multiple cameras. Let's do that. Oh yeah, how about that? How about and it was a collaborative, and all those people who've taken solo credit that were on set had something to do with it. But my
They
dad,
were all, so they were kind of all in on it. They did
yeah,
contribute. They were all there, but yeah, that because you can't say, well, it can't be just him and just him. And when everyone says it's there, but that makes sense. And that all these people also coming out of radio, and you mentioned how, like, with Lucille Ball coming out of radio and having the live audience and playing off them, and then like, okay, we're going to do TV. TV was so like radio in the beginning. It really was kind of like, well, I guess it's a radio show. We have pictures now,
right, yeah,
but
and yeah, but it was tricky. How do we? And I think I Love Lucy is great just for any TV historian because it took it to a different level. That three camera technique and the reasons and the breaking of things. I mean, having the first pregnant woman known as pregnant character on TV.
said the words. It was like
Yeah,
unbelievable. And the fact that, she did a show about this cute couple with a actor, a different guy, and then when what if it was the real husband?
yeah, yeah, and that was tricky because he was of Cuban descent, Cuban American, and
It
that
was shocking then, shocking. It
person of
was
color. Yeah.
interracial. He was a foreign person. It was like, oh, it's a big deal.
Broke a lot of bounds, and we don't realize that. I mean, I didn't when I watched I Love Lucy. It was in reruns, and it was on every night, and it was an enjoyable show. But I didn't think anything of it. But yeah, you read back about the times. It really pressed its boundaries, and I think
It's true
TV.
when you think about it, we thought nothing of it. We go, oh yeah, well they're so beloved, and oh yeah, Desi and Lucy and Desi, everybody loved Desi, and you're going, wait, he was he was a foreign person who spoke another language and would be considered interracial in its day and a big deal, like illegal in some states. And here they were, a beloved TV couple. It was absolutely earth shattering at the time.
Right? Yeah, yeah. It's amazing, and TV does that. Good TV does that. It pushes the boundaries. I've always loved my mom's characters. Somebody once made a comment. She did do a. She was. Uh, I'll call it hired. The Star Trek, one of the Star Trek conventions, invited her to be the VIP guest one day because she appeared
That's so crazy. She was on Star Trek. I mean, it's just like that blows my mind right there.
on one episode of the original series called Metamorphosis. And they asked her on Saturday, this was, I think, in 2016, to be the VIP guest at the Star Trek convention in Vegas. The VIP guest on Sunday was a fellow named William Shatner. And my mom was the Saturday guest. And she just got paid. And I never talk money with mom. But she was paid one lump sum, and she just had to have a intimate conversation with people who paid for the VIP package, and then do the stage interview, and then do the pictures with the fans, and then do the signing of the autographs. And at the end of it, they handed her a check, and she went home. And her only negotiating point was she wanted one of her sons to hang out with her during the day, and so they said yes, and she chose me. So that was a hoot as
Nice.
well. Yeah.
Just ringside seats for everything. So
Yeah. Oh, I was going to
you,
say that, but somebody asked there about my mom. Not, it was weird. They said that she in Metamorphosis played such a strong character, and I said, Betty Anderson in Father Knows Best was a strong character, and Ellie Mae and Andy Griffith was a strong character, pushing boundaries. Ellie Mae Walker ran for city council. There's an episode in the first season, and that
right.
makes everybody's head explode in Mayberry because a woman is running for city council.
Oh, she didn't play like the Dottie, Dizzy, or the dumb characters or everything. She played the characters who were out doing stuff and were very active. Oh, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. But yeah, once you do any episode of any of the incarnations of Star Trek, that's it. You're kind of on the list for the conventions for life. I just want to do like one line in one episode somewhere of any of them, and then I just get to go to all the conventions. I would just,
Exactly. Exactly.
I would love it. The obvious question is, how have you watched the industry change? But you did watch the industry change because when you started working in it, you wound up working on. We talked about Friends money. You worked on Friends. You worked on all of these shows, and yes, you worked with Dean Butler, our Almanza, when he was Moondoggy on the New Gidget.
Right. During my acting
You even
period,
mentioned him.
during my brief acting period, I was on some episodes of The New Gidget, and yes, nepotism I'm sure played a hand in that because I was not a great film actor. And yeah,
Nepo baby, Nepo baby.
maybe yes. Dean and Karen Richmond, who played Gidget, they were great. They were a great on-screen couple. He was a wonderful man. I cheer him on. I have yet to read his book that just got released. I bet. Great guy, great guy. And so I did see the industry change. It was during the new Gidget. That was my dad's last show he executive produced in the middle '80s. Um, my dad had knee surgery somewhere in there. He needed somebody to drive him around for a couple of weeks because he couldn't drive. And he asked me. I was working at Hamburger Hamlet Sherman Oaks doing the actor waiter thing. And I took time off of work and became his driver. And for that second time, this time as an adult, I got to see the other side of the business and fell in love with it. And so that's what started me. I was a production assistant on TV commercials and music videos, and then eventually was working for Warner Brothers Television, sometimes farmed out to be what's called a production coordinator on a pilot series. And
Which means you do everything. That's one of those. What is the production? Whatever is needed to be done at that second. Yes,
production assistant definitely was everything. And I
it's
had
everything.
great things. And the production coordinator, a lot of things, not as much as the production assistant, perhaps, but good stuff. And then I was working as the production coordinator on the first season of a show called The Wayans Brothers.
Wow.
And that was an experience. It was a show that was in last place. And if it aired twice in the same week, it would be in the two last slots. And I thought, well, it's a job. And then my friend who I had done a pilot with, a line producer named Todd Stevens, needed a new assistant. And his show had been picked up the year before, and his assistant was leaving after season one. And he said, Petey, you want to come on and be my assistant on Friends? It's like, yes. Goodbye, Wayans Brothers. Hello, Friends. And so it was great. I worked on Friends for 2 seasons, and then I realized television wasn't calling me. Something else was calling me. But what I learned during my time at Warner Brothers Television was how much the industry had changed. And maybe I was spoiled. My dad's shows and the sets sounds like the Little House sets. They were very much a family. The people
Yep.
came together, worked together. Everybody was working on the same product. I remember when I was acting on the new Gidget, I was in a makeup chair, and the lady who was doing makeup was really nasty, and not to me, but she was talking to the main makeup person and said, I bet you that little witch who was in here before took my eyeliner or rouge or whatever. Just was
Right.
really rude. And when she left to probably go get her rouge or whatever she was looking for, the head of the makeup person looked at his assistant and said, call the union and make sure she's not on tomorrow. And that was a Harry Ackerman show. The system,
You can't do that. Yeah.
if you don't fit, you're not, the system's going to push you out.
We
So
used to say in Little House that if people really weren't fit, now we say, you could die in a buggy crash. Things happen on the prairie. There could be another fire, another outbreak of anthrax, and just, oh, she didn't make it. Oh, so yeah, people have just, if it really was like unpleasant, it was like, oh, where'd they go? Oh, they're not here. But you see people from the older shows who are still friends. So like the cast of Gilligan's Island were all weirdly tight, and the Little House people were friends, the Walton's friends. And then you see, I mean, yeah, when I watched the Friends cast reunion thing on TV, it was great. But they talked about how some of them hadn't hardly spoken to each other since the show. It was like, oh, good to see you. When did you last see each other? A few years ago. They weren't hanging out. A couple
no,
of them were like sort of friendly and hung out. Most of them did not hang out together really at all after the show. And that's the norm. People from TV shows generally, that's kind of it. You finish the show and you go, well, that was swell. I'll see you people around.
right. And you talk correctly about, Little House, of course, but Father Knows Best. My mom is still in contact with Billy and Lauren, the actors who played her younger siblings. And throughout her life, Jane Wyatt was a mother figure for my mom, and they would go out to lunch and dinner
Yes.
frequently. And Jane would offer my mother, counsel and suggestions. And if Jane was so close that she was at my wedding. We had
Right,
January.
Little House, we still call each other up for stuff. I mean, Karen, I mean, that's his mom. And I'll tell you, Charlotte, the Miss Beatles, one of, my besties. I'm besties with Miss Beatle now. It's very strange, but it's that kind of thing. Now,
Yeah.
okay, so of course, you are Father Ackerman, back east. Where are you now? What, you're in Virginia?
No, I'm now in Maryland.
Mm. Maryland. Oh, lovely. Okay. And so you became an Episcopalian priest.
Yes,
Awesome. How did
I-
that happen?
well, it started by being an Episcopalian. It didn't help that my mother, who was not anything, decided that when she and my dad were married, and my dad was adopting my older brother Brian, whom she had quite secretly during Father Knows Best, my mother, America's teenager, gave birth to a son,
There's
and
a thing that people back then didn't know what was going on, but it was. So it's going on.
exactly. So Brian, my older brother, was getting baptized. My mother decided, well, I should be baptized. And it was the Episcopal church they decided to go to, All Saints, Beverly Hills. And she was pregnant with me. No problem, except after baptism at the Saturday night service called the Easter Vigil, the Saturday night before Easter,
Right.
when baptisms happen. Her water broke on the way home. So I was born on Easter Sunday. So I think the die was cast that
Destiny.
but what happened was I was on Friends. I was active in my Episcopal church. Marie and our kids were going to so many churches now in my life. St. Michael and All Angels in Studio City,
Yes.
and I realized on Friends I wasn't fulfilled. Here I could pick up the phone and call the representative from Nike, who handled the Friends show. Anything that Friends needed, they would supply. All I had to do was call up the phone and say I need a new pair of running shoes. And the next day I would have shoes, shirts, socks, everything on my desk. And I wasn't fulfilled. And I said, okay, I love my church. I love my family. Why am I not loving my job? What's here? And so I took a leap of faith, no pun intended, and I just left television. I went work in a 9 to 5 job in a property management office, getting the same pay I was getting on Friends, just working normal hours. So that was great. And soon my church said, hey, we're looking to put somebody on staff part-time as our youth leader. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah. And I started doing that. And then the parish administrator job opened up, and it fit everything else I'd been doing and was doing. So I took that job, and people in the church, the clergy, the parents of the youth, other people have started to say to me, have you ever thought about becoming a priest? There's something about you. And I had been
Wow.
doing the same thing. And there's a whole discernment process. And my bishop wanted me to go to Virginia. So we moved to Virginia, ended up staying in Virginia for 15 years. Only 3 of it was schooling, and we liked it out here. 2019, my wife and our son and I moved. Our daughter lives in Chicago now. We moved back to California, to Lodi, California, and it just wasn't a good fit. And COVID happened, and we realized raising up our kids on the East Coast, that was home now. So we returned here. In the Episcopal Church, we clergy can find our own jobs. So we just look at the listings and we apply and interview, and that makes it kind of easier to move around. And that's why I'm now in Maryland.
That's crazy. And it's a fabulous thing in the book. And you also talk in the book about your sobriety being a major factor as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been sober now for 12 years,
Congratulations.
and it's when I was a kid, my dad would drink when he came home from work, and he would change. He was a very
Mm.
affable fellow, and he would change. There was just something dark. And um, I remember one day as a kid saying to him, Dad, when you drink, you change. Could you not drink anymore? And he gave me something like, okay, thank you for letting me know, Peter. And nothing changed.
Mm.
Um, and I didn't pay attention, but I started to get this little tapping that I was going down the same road. One, I was drinking every night since I was in my 20s. Um, and, I, again, drank every night. I'm ordained priest and I'm drinking every night. And when my daughter was young, she came up to me and said, Dad, when you drink, you change. Could you not
Oh, no.
do that anymore? And I said, thank you for letting me know, Amy. I'll attend to that. And I didn't. And Yeah, and I had my sobriety came in an amazing way. I was um, a typical night of drinking and concluded. I was in bed. I made it to bed this time. Marie was sleeping next to me, and I woke up around 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, stone cold sober, and a conversation started in my head and in my voice. And I said, "I'm an alcoholic." And I answered, "So what does that mean?" And I said, "It means I'm not going to drink anymore." And I then said to myself, "How are you going to do that?" And I said, "I guess I'm going to go to one of those meetings." And I went on the computer. Thankfully, computers are around now. And I found a meeting at 7 a.m. in Northern Virginia, where we lived at the time. And the road to happy destiny began there.
Wow. Wow. That's, did it freak you out though to have your daughter literally come to you and say exactly the same thing that you said to your father? Did that feel weird?
It felt weird in the fact that as an alcoholic, we pretend and we're really good at fooling ourselves. I pretended that I wasn't and that I didn't have a problem. And when I heard that, I think what I did was I told her the right thing and then I drank it away so I
Mm.
wouldn't have to face it because now that I look back on it, I know exactly how I was feeling. I was caught. She caught me. I was a psychologist will have a field day with it, but I was trying to show my dad how it's done. My dad would change. I was going to show you could drink and just be happy and have a good time, and that's it. And I ended up becoming just like my dad was.
Uh,
And he over time, he never went into any rooms that I know of, never admitted to anything. His drinking did change. He went from hard liquors to beer and wine, and that eased up somewhat in the experience of his drinking. So I don't know. I can't say he was. He died in 1991 at the age of 78. I can't say that he was an alcoholic because he never admitted it himself. But um, I know I drank exactly like he did, and I acted like he did when I drank. And I know I'm an alcoholic, so that's
it's
why
that
I'm.
personality change and ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
but just incredible. So how now do you look at, the television industry and you're growing up from the perspective of someone who's an Episcopalian priest, someone now with such a spiritual basis of living? How do you look back now on the industry? Does it seem different, or you must be really relieved that you had the family that you had at least?
Oh yeah. Oh, I believe me. I milk my experiences. But part of the reason I wrote my book, Mom, Dad, Me, and Classic TV, is that um, I would share my stories as kind of sermon stories. So I'd open up a sermon, you know, telling about the time I was on Batman and this happened. If I don't just tell it, but if there's a way to weave it into the text, we
Great
have to.
angle. Great way to get the congregation to wake up and
Exactly.
not fall asleep during the service. Did he say Batman?
Exactly. As long as you can get the story to be as part of the tie-up of the sermon as well. And so the point is really on the scripture. In the Episcopal Church, we're on what's called a lectionary, so we know any given Sunday what the readings are. So sometimes I'm looking at the readings and I'm like, okay, this is where I feel God's calling me to preach on for my congregation. And then I'll think, what's a good story to tie in with this theme? And I'll say, oh, I know. And so I weave in Hollywood stories, not all the time, but frequently. So I milk my Hollywood past. And
Absolutely.
people kept saying to me, you should put those into a book. You should put them into a book. And finally I listened.
I'm so glad you did. Where can people find you? Where can they find your book? Where can they talk to you? You have a website. Where do we find you?
Because I have a full-time vocation, I'm not
I
into
see.
this whole author thing. So I
You're
don't have
not
a
on
website.
TikTok then.
Exactly. Um, I do have a Facebook page, and of course, there's a lot of Peter Ackermans out there, including a Peter Ackerman producer. So, if you put in my middle initial K, that will help. Peter K.
Hey,
Ackerman.
Ackerman.
And then I've also got on Facebook a small page devoted to my book, Mom, Dad, Me, and
Okay.
Classic TV. I've had people that want to have a book signed. They buy it. I can arrange for them to mail it to me, and I'll sign it and send it back to them. And
And they can order it. I have it on Kindle. I totally order on Kindle and it's fabulous. And so they can get it. Did you do an audiobook as well?
no, Bear Manor Media is my
I love
publisher.
Bear Manor. Oh, you're Bear Manor. Love Bear Manor.
Yeah, and great books, and they in my contract with them, it said I could opt to do the audio if I had the equipment, and I'm not a voiceover person. And during COVID, I looked into it. I just don't have the wherewithal to make the sound room and all that. So I don't know that it's going to be made into an audiobook. Barnes and Noble carries it, Amazon carries it in
Fantastic.
paperback forms, hardcovers, and as you said, digitally.
Never know, because our fabulous Miss Beadle, yes, at Charlotte Stewart. A lot of my friends who went with Bear Manor, and a couple of them said, "Oh, okay, well, I did a separate deal with did an audiobook, so
Okay,
there's hope for you yet." We'll
good.
get.
I'll check that out.
But yeah, no, it's a marvelous book for anyone. If you liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and love the stories of how TV began and Miller Donahue and fabulous stories of a child going, wait, what is happening? Oh, look, everyone's on TV. Fantastic. And then a whole story of just of yes, of finding yourself and your true calling. It's a marvelous book and well told, and you clearly adore your family. They come really jump off the page as lovely people.
And they are. So thank you, Allison.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you. And I'm Alison Argerman. This is the Alison Argerman Show.